It really was a tense weekend. An actual war in Europe, the threat of a war in the Indo-Pacific and a deadly flare-up in West Asia. Israel and Gaza came very close to another full-blown war. They exchanged fire for 3 days. They flattened buildings. They killed innocent civilians. But now there is a fragile ceasefire in place. How exactly did things escalate so fast? The first shot was fired by Israel on Friday. They claim it was preemptive. Terror groups were plotting attacks on Israel, so they acted first. And who did they target? Taysir al-Jabri. He's a senior commander of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Now, some quick background. The PIJ, or the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, was founded in 1981. It was one of the two major militant groups operating, it is rather one of the two major militant groups operating in Gaza. The other is Hamas. Their ideology, very similar to most Palestinian militant groups. They deny the existence of Israel. Their goal is to create an Islamic Palestinian state in West Asia. And who funds them? Iran. The Islamic Jihad gets most of their weapons and money from Iran. In fact, their top leader was in Tehran on Saturday. He was meeting President Ibrahim Raisi when Israeli rockets pounded Gaza. Were they on target? Well, some of them were. The PIJ commander was killed in the airstrike, but some of the projectiles also hit civilian buildings. At least 10 people were killed. Among them was a 5-year-old child. Israel's caretaker Prime Minister Yair Lapid announced the military operation. He said he was not interested in a broader campaign.
The action in Gaza today was in the face of concrete threats that disrupted the routine of life in the south. Israel is not interested in a broad campaign in Gaza, but neither is it afraid of it.
Maybe Lapid was hoping for a targeted strike. But these things have a way of spiraling out of control, and that's what happened over the weekend. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad responded with force. They fired 1,100 rockets from Gaza. 1,100. 200 of them landed inside their own territory. The rest were shot down by Israel's Iron Dome. Now, we keep talking about the Iron Dome during every Israeli conflict, and there's a reason for that. The Iron Dome success rate was 97% this weekend. Only 3% of the rockets escaped. And that is ruthless efficiency for any military equipment. Some of the rockets did reach the outskirts of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. Their residents were herded indoors by air raid sirens. Take a look at how that played out. It was supposed to be a normal weekend on the beach. Instead, those people were running for their lives. At least they had the Iron Dome to protect them. Because of it, Israel reported 0 casualties during this conflict. 0. Compare that to the situation in Gaza. 44 people were killed in 3 days and 300 plus injured, many of them civilians. Gaza's health ministry says 15 children were among the victims.
I was at my grandfather's house when suddenly the rubble started to fall on all of us. We started screaming and the neighbors came to rescue us. I was reciting the last prayers. I didn't expect to live until the moment they rescued me.
And that was a 9-year-old girl in Gaza. She was not a terror mastermind. She was not involved with the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, but she was caught in the middle of this madness. And like I said, it's almost like a never-ending cycle. Islamists threaten Israel's right to exist. Israel responds with disproportionate force, and dozens of Palestinians end up paying the price. Now, this may sound hard to believe, but this conflict could have spiraled into something a lot worse, possibly a full-blown war. Let me show you some pictures. Israel was deploying artillery and tanks to the border. They were prepared for an escalation, for a much longer conflict. Just last year, remember, Israel and Gaza had fought a war. 11 days of non-stop fighting. More than 250 people died in that war. We very nearly saw a repeat this weekend, but thankfully both sides agreed to a ceasefire on Sunday. It was mediated by Egypt. It came into effect at 8:30 p.m. GMT. So does that mean that war has been averted? Well, not yet. Ceasefires between Palestine and Israel are extremely delicate. All it takes is one provocation or one miscalculation. In fact, that very nearly happened. Israel fired a couple of missiles into Gaza after the truce was announced. They claim it was retaliation for earlier strikes. Well, whatever the justification, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad did not respond. So right now there is a fragile peace. Both sides have already started claiming victory. The PIJ says the truce has left them stronger.
The enemy aimed to break Islamic Jihad, but we didn't break. On the contrary, we made an achievement and we forced the conditions that we started the battle for with the enemy. This is how simple the deal was, and the achievement is clear.
And it sums up the problem in this conflict. Leaders who don't care about the people involved. Imagine if Hamas had gotten involved in this fight, or if Israel had decided to escalate further, the death toll would have been much higher. But leaders on both sides do not seem to care. In fact, they benefit from such short-term conflicts. Let me explain how this works. Israel is led by caretaker Prime Minister Yair Lapid. His military credentials are yet to be proven. And in Israel, that's a big factor. Israelis like prime ministers with military experience. And in the month of November this year, the country is electing a new government. So what does Lapid do? Embark on this unnecessary escalation. Same with the Islamic Jihad. They sense that Hamas is not as strong as before. They sense that there is an opening in Gaza. So what do? They plot more attacks against Israel. And it's always the residents who end up paying the price. This is what Gaza looks like after 3 days of fighting. Buildings cut in half, homes and apartments flattened, hospitals overstretched. And for what? To make a macho political statement. That's all there is to it. Israel has begun easing the blockade on Gaza. Food and fuel trucks have started shuttling again. So hopefully the humanitarian crisis can be contained. A lot depends, though, on the international community. So far, the response was focused on the conflict. The US, Europe, Russia, they all urged restraint from both sides. Iran, Turkey and the Arab League condemned Israel's actions. Now, if this truce holds, the international community must increase aid missions. As for the long-term solution, I'm afraid there's no magic spell. As long as terror groups dominate the Palestinian narrative, as long as Israeli leaders politicize the idea of self-defense, as long as world powers decide to manage instead of resolve the Palestinian crisis, such flare-ups will continue. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.